What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. Now today I wanted to bring to you a deck profile for Scythe Control 3.0, and the reason I'm doing this is because I was thinking a lot this weekend after watching the regional results come in one after another, and basically seeing ABC just fucking dominate everything, and that's no surprise. I mean, I was expecting ABC to do that well, so I was kind of thinking over the weekend, like, what would be the best deck to defeat ABC? And it's really funny because after playing with some ideas, I came up with this one. Now, if you don't know what Scythe Control is, essentially it's the deck that Corey McDuffie coined. It's based off of hand artifact trap tricks, and it pretty much just utilizes like artifact Scythe and the artifact cards to stun and control your opponent, and basically you just win the game from there. So it's pretty cool, and I was really thinking, like, after playing with some math and doing some numbers and stuff, this deck has like a upwards of a 90% chance of, if you go first, you can prevent your opponent from going into an ABC Dragon Buster, or if you're going against any deck, preventing them from using the extra deck in general. So, funny enough, even though I intended for it to be good against ABC, it actually works very well against decks like Metal Foes and Burning Abyss, and I guess Blue Eyes to an extent as well, because it has a very, very good ability to lock out the extra deck, and by locking out the extra deck, you're preventing a lot of decks from being able to do a lot of their power play. So I'm going to go ahead and get right into the deck profile. So, to start off with the artifact lineup, we've got Artifact Scythe, Artifact Lancia, Artifact Bagaltak, and Artifact Moraltak. Now, Artifact Scythe is pretty much the heart and soul of this deck. You know, when it's special summoned during your opponent's turn, they cannot special summon any monsters from the extra deck for the rest of their turn. So that is incredible, because if we can combo that with with any of our other cards in this deck and be able to special summon it during the opponent's turn, they're going to be locked out of ABC Dragon Buster, they're going to be locked out of Dante, they're going to be locked out of Pendulum Summoning. Like, they're going to be locked out of so many different potential plays that it can pretty much just end their turn, because they're not going to be able to do a whole lot other than just maybe summon or set a monster and maybe one or two back row. So, on top of that, we also have Artifact Lancia, and we have 3 copies of each of these. Obviously Artifact Scythe, because it's Scythe Control, but Artifact Lancia at 3 as well. And the reason for that is because Artifact Lancia, actually, during our opponent's turn, we can discard it as a hand trap, and they're not able to banish cards, meaning they cannot summon their ABC Dragon Buster, because they're not going to be able to banish the components to be able to summon it from the extra deck. So that's really cool, because it gives us some versatility going second, that if we open Lancia, then we actually have a chance to prevent them from going into Dragon Buster, set up our plays on our turn, and then pretty much stun them out from there. We also have 1 copy of Moraltak because it's limited, but it's good for hard removal. And then 1 copy of Bagaltak because Bagaltak is very good for just combo plays, especially in tandem with Artifact Ignition and things like that. So that rounds up the artifacts. Moving on to the rest of the monster lineup, we have 2 copies of Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, and 2 copies of Thunder King Ryo. So you're probably thinking, oh, Cimo, you put Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries in the main. Of course this is a good deck against ABC. Well, ironically enough, too, Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries has a Scythe in her hand, and it's Scythe Control. But beyond that, Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, the reason this is in here, I actually added this last minute because it helps against a lot of our matchups that are not ABC, because the deck is already very good at, you know, like I said, that 90 to 95% chance of having an out to ABC Dragon Buster going first. That's not really the issue. The issue is against other decks that have, like, very powerful cards. We want to make sure we hit Dante against Burning Abyss. We want to make sure we hit Spirit Dragon against Blue Eyes. We want to make sure we hit Psyframe Lord Omega against Dark Synchro. So maining the Ghost Reapers is actually very strong, because it helps take out problem cards that our deck isn't exactly equipped to deal with, you know, without wasting a ton of resources. It just happens to, you know, be that it also works against ABC Dragon Buster, but in tandem with Artifact Lancia, it also gives us a total now of 5 hand traps going second, that if we open one of them, we can pretty much shut out ABC, which is incredible. That's a very high chance. I think that's like roughly 40 to 50% chance of opening one in our opening hand going second. And then 2 copies of Thunder King. This is pretty much the only normal summonable monster in the deck, but again, for a strategy like this, it's very strong. It helps that we can stop any inherent summon like Blue Eyes Alternative Dragon, which can give us a lot of trouble in this deck. And then it's also good because it prevents our opponents from adding cards from deck to hand, because that means they can't use stuff like Union Hanger or any of their, you know, plethora of search cards. So having Thunder King in tandem with something like Artifact Scythe is incredibly, incredibly strong. Thunder King's always been a formidable card, and now that it's back at 2, it works really well in this deck. So that's going to round out the monster lineup. Moving on to the spells. My favorite part about this deck is the spells, because it's literally nothing but draw power and like just combo fuel. So we have 3 copies of Artifact Ignition, 3 copies of Card of Demise, 3 Pot of Desires, and 2 Pot of Duality. So Artifact Ignition's really good because it allows us to, if we open Artifact Scythe or Lancia plus Ignition, it allows us to combo those off and summon them on our opponent's turn, but it also allows us to do combos with Beagle Tack and stuff as well, so that we have just a huge amount of combos, but it also acts as spot removal too, so we can, you know, hit cards like Union Hanger or any problem cards that we see fit, so it also acts as spell and trap removal. And then the rest of this is just complete draw power, because what's so cool about this deck is it can utilize all these different elements of draw power, and it's not really hindered by the side effects. Card of Demise is really good because when you see in the trap lineup, we want to ditch our artifacts to the graveyard sometimes because we have cards like Call of the Haunted and Oasis to bring them back, so we don't even care if we discard them. And it's cool because the artifacts can set themselves to the back row to better utilize Card of Demise, so we can either discard them if we want to, or set them in the back row depending on what other combo pieces we have. Then we have the 3 Potted Desires because we want to just get into our combo pieces and start stunning our opponent immediately. There's not one card in here we really care about losing, so it's just a perfect way to just keep getting more and more advantage. And then Potted Duality as well. Pot of Duality is really good because it just allows us to get the specific combo piece that we need. It does inhibit special summoning, but at the same time, it's really not that big of a deal, again, because we're going to be doing most of our special summoning on our opponent's turn. So moving on to the trap lineup, there is going to be a lot of them. To start off, we have 3 copies of Artifact Sanctum. Obviously, this is an artifact deck, and we want to get to Scythe as quickly as possible. 3 copies of Call of the Haunted, 3 copies of Oasis of Dragon Souls, and then 3 copies of Dimensional Barrier. Now, I know this deck is kind of tailored to when Invasion Vengeance comes out, but with 3 Call and 3 Oasis, we have access to getting all of our artifacts back from the graveyard and just stopping our opponent from doing anything that we want, popping cards with Moral Attack, bringing back Thunder King, which is really fucking cool. There's a lot of different plays that we can do. And then also the Dimensional Barrier just acts as another card that we can use against any of our matchups. ABC, we can use it to stop them from summoning. We can use it against Blue Eyes, with Synchros, Metal Foes, Pendulums. There's so much versatility in Dimensional Barrier that it makes a very, very strong control card in this deck. And then for the remaining traps, we have 3 copies of Solemn Strike, 1 copy of Solemn Warning, and 1 copy of Vanity's Emptiness, simply because they are the best traps in the game at the moment, and we need to have a lot of good answers because our deck is slow, so being able to have these cards to just further slow our opponent down so that we can control the game and dictate the pace is exactly what we want to do. So that's going to be it for the deck profile. What's really cool about this deck is that you can side deck and smokescreen into like another archetype to help some of our other matchups. You could smokescreen into Satellar Artifact or Cosmo Artifact or any of these other different things. And the other cool thing is this deck doesn't really rely on the extra deck, so running Ghost Reaper in the main, you could theoretically run like 5 to 7 monsters in the extra deck that are problematic, and it's totally fine because the only monsters you really care about in the extra deck, you know, other than possibly maybe when you smokescreen, are like Pleiades, Volcasaurus, maybe a Gaia Dragon, like some generic rank 5s that this deck can play and utilize to their full potential. Pleiades being very key because you want to recycle your Call of the Haunted and pretty much Scythe loop them. But that's going to be it for the deck profile, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this deck. If you really think it has any potential at all, I know it's kind of just a fun brew I came up with, but it's something I've been tinkering around with. So if you haven't already, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Yu-Gi-Oh content. And lastly, if you really enjoy my content, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by donating $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you awesome Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thank you guys so much again. We'll see you next time.